East of Los Angeles, a calm holiday weekend is shattered by a devastating explosion. A neighborhood is destroyed.
I turned and saw my house totally on fire. All the houses behind me were all on fire.
Where are they? Where are they?
Fiery wreckage is strewn for blocks. Investigators must discover why this airliner crashed and find a way to stop it from ever happening again.
Mayday, Mayday.
Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, is one of the busiest in the world. It's used by 40 million passengers each year. More than 1,500 planes take off and land every day. It's August the 31st, 1986, Labor Day weekend. Today, a junior air traffic controller, Walter White, will be handling some of that traffic.
Let's go. That was the big one.
White isn't yet a fully fledged controller. He has to put in more time before he gets his final certification.
Hey, Carl, how's it going?
Hey, slow, slow, slow.
It was a long weekend, and it was a beautiful day in Los Angeles. It was absolutely clear outside, which we call Chamber of Commerce type day.
You want to take a break? Have a cigarette? I can sit in for you.
That was my normal assigned shift, and Walter came in and asked me if I wanted a break, wanted to go smoke a cigarette, and I said, sure.
All right.
Traffic was light, it wasn't very busy, it was Sunday morning.
Well, certainly, any controller is looking to get seasoning, if you will. 3 months, 4 months, that's a pretty new controller.
Los Angeles Approach, good morning.
I mean, it wasn't my turn for a break. Walter wanted to work the sector. As I remember correctly, he wanted to work it for some proficiency time. He hadn't worked it in a while.
ACL 60, can you see the runway 25 left?
Roger, LA Approach.
Thank you. Reduce speed to 200, then descend and maintain 6,000.
200, descend and maintain 6,000. Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Several hundred kilometers to the south, passengers are boarding an Aeromexico DC-9. Dr. Donald Wong and his sons are returning from a highly successful fishing trip.
Jason, I think we should put it up in the kitchen.
They caught an enormous sailfish,
Your mom would love it.
which they plan to display at home.
Labor Day weekend was the last weekend before school was to start. Donald decided that it would be fun to take the boys fishing down in Mexico, to go deep sea fishing, which he'd only done one other time in his life. This would be a father-son bonding weekend. And it was also the first time that they had traveled without me.
Just east of LA, the suburban city of Cerritos wakes up slowly. In the 1970s, this bustling community had been one of the fastest growing in Los Angeles County.
My husband had been working out of town all week, and he was coming home for the weekend. And that Sunday morning, I decided, let's just stay home, not go to church.
I'm gonna go out and get your favorite things for a good breakfast. Javier, go and take a shower.
And I left to go to the grocery store. In the home was Alex. He was 14. His twin sister, Angelica. She was asleep. He was asleep still. And Javier, that was my 16-year-old, and my husband.
As Estrada leaves on her errand, Aeromexico Flight 498 is just 20 minutes from LA. Captain Antonio Valdez-Prom is acting as co-pilot as they approach the city. First Officer Jose Valencia is piloting this leg of their journey.
Ready when you are, Cap.
About 22 kilometers south of LAX sits the Torrance Airport. Operating in the mammoth shadow of LAX, Torrance serves private planes and amateur pilots. It's one of several small airports that operate near LA, a region that has over 6,000 weekend flyers.
Fuel set.
At the end of a busy summer, William Kramer, his daughter Caroline, and wife Kathleen are finally taking to the skies.
Piper 4891.
All clear for takeoff. Good morning, Piper 4891. This is Torrance Tower. You're clear for takeoff from runway 5.
They're heading to Big Bear Lake,
Rolling tower.
about 200 kilometers northeast. A meticulous man, William Kramer is an executive for an engineering company. 6 years ago, at the age of 47, Kramer bought his first airplane, a stylish and swift Piper Cherokee.
Wings west 5225, Los Angeles approach, depart Sealed Beach, heading 320. Expect a visual approach, runway 25 left. Report airport in sight. Thanks.
Walter White's job as arrivals controller is to make sure incoming planes keep well clear of each other. He's directing them to land on one of two runways.
Aerial approach, runway 25 left. Thank you.
Southeast of LAX, the crew of Aeromexico Flight 498 is still a few minutes from their first contact with Walter White. But in the skies above Los Angeles, a deadly series of events is about to unfold. Dozens of people who have never met will be bound together forever in a tragedy that will affect everyone who flies.
Airspeed.
August the 31st, 1986, Labor Day weekend.
All clear for takeoff, Torrance.
Just south of Los Angeles, William Kramer and his family are finally on their way for a long-awaited holiday.
Okay. Just an hour to go, we're in Big Bear Lake. They're reporting visibility of 14 miles today. Pretty good.
As the Torrance Airport recedes behind him, Kramer begins climbing to 3,000 meters on his way northeast to Big Bear Lake. Several kilometers away, a half-full DC-9 from Mexico is approaching Los Angeles International Airport. Less than 2,000 meters below them, Teresa Estrada is driving home with the groceries for a holiday breakfast. Her husband and 3 children are waiting just a few blocks away.
That's it. Holiday's over.
PSA 1765, 12 plus, 1 mile southbound.
It's not a busy morning, and one by one, arrivals controller Walter White guides his planes in safely.
Report airport in sight.
At 11:47 a.m., he gets his first call from Aeromexico Flight 498.
Los Angeles approach. Good morning. This is Aeromexico 498.
Aeromexico 498, Los Angeles approach, 25 left, final approach course. Do you have information?
Aeromexico Flight 498 is now officially inside what's known as the Terminal Control Area, or TCA. Sometimes referred to as the birdcage, the TCA is a complex piece of three-dimensional airspace around the airport.
It's restricted airspace that's normally found around heavily congested airports or hub airports where the traffic density is extremely high and you need to control the access into and out of that airspace.
Aero Mexico 498, traffic 10 o'clock, 1 mile northbound, altitude unknown.
Roger, 498.
Aero Mexico 498, reduce speed to 190, then descend and maintain 6,000.
As the Aeromexico plane descends, William Kramer and his family continue climbing.
I hope it's like this when we get to Big Bear.
We should be able to see the ocean by now. Hon, take a look at the map and look around the 4-5 and see if you can see any kind of landmarks that we can use.
Oh, what am I looking for?
Walter White is keeping his eye on the Aeromexico jet when his attention is abruptly drawn to another plane that's just appeared on his radar. It's not one he's expecting.
One approach, 66 Romeo is on a flight from Fullerton. Cruising altitude is 4,500. We'd like following.
The pilot of a small Grumman Tiger asks White to help guide him through the crowded terminal control area. Pilots are supposed to contact LAX approach before they enter the controlled airspace. This pilot could be in the path of incoming traffic. But before White can deal with the private plane, he gets a call from the Aeromexico DC-9.
What speed do you want? We're reducing to 290. No, to 190.
Okay, you can hold what you have, sir.
White decides to give the Aeromexico jet the runway closest to their gate.
Change in plan, sir. Stand by.
Roger, 498.
With the DC-9 on hold, White turns to the intruder.
Grumman 66 Romeo, squawk 4524. Remain clear of the TCA.
White tells the pilot of the Grumman to use a unique radio channel. But he seems confused.
4, 5, what were the other two numbers?
4524. Grumman 66 Romeo, are you at 4,500 now?
Negative, we're at 3,400 and climbing.
Okay, you are right in the middle of the TCA, sir.
Grumman 66 Romeo, I suggest in future you look at your TCA chart. You just had an aircraft pass right off your left above you at
5,000. And we run a lot of jets right through there at 3,500.
Well, what do you suggest I do now?
As the crew of Aeromexico Flight 498 continue to close in on the airport,
Landing lights.
their DC-9 is rocked by a violent shudder.
Bugs, altimeter bugs.
What was that?
Aeromexico 498, Los Angeles approach.
First Officer Valencia tries desperately to control their dive.
Aeromexico 498.
Los Angeles approach.
This can't be.
I saw a huge explosion, just the red, vibrant colors of a fire, just huge explosion, like the way a bomb might hit the ground.
White is getting no response from the Aeromexico jet.
Aeromexico 498, Los Angeles approach.
And now he can't find it on his radar screen.
I'm sitting there talking with the two departure controllers and not really thinking. I hear Walter say something like,
I think I lost one. Aeromexico 498, Los Angeles approach.
That immediately got everybody's attention. So I looked at the radars and could hear him calling Aeromexico 498. Called him several times on the radio. Where was Aeromexico? At this point, we weren't absolutely sure what had happened.
White calls to an incoming jet for help.
American 333 Heavy. I want you to take a look around at 11 o'clock. I just lost contact with a DC-9. Let me know if you see anything down there, please.
11 o'clock, 5 miles. What altitude?
He was last assigned 6. He's no longer on my radar scope, American 333 Heavy.
Okay, I see a very large smoke screen off on the left side of the aircraft, about 11 o'clock.
I went down the street to go to my house, and I saw a woman's head. That her body had been cut in a diagonal, and she was just laying there. There was nothing but debris and fires sporadically all over the place, and I could see fire in the whole neighborhood.
Nearby, an engine from a local fire station had been on a training exercise led by Fire Captain Larry Hambleton.
All of a sudden, one of the firemen tapped me on the shoulder and said, "There's a big column of smoke, off to our left." So I picked up the mic and made a guess at the address.
Responding to a large fire north of 91 north of Carmenita.
They came back and said, "Well, we've got a report of an airliner down." So I upgraded the response to basically triple what I initially asked for.
I'm calling for a third alarm and 2 air squads east of 183 in Carmenita.
As we approached, I realized that in addition to the aircraft parts in the street, there were people, body parts, which changed the complexion of the whole thing.
Derek, get in here. Set up a perimeter.
Let's go!
Hello? Hello? Can anybody hear me?
At Los Angeles approach, Walter White, deeply shaken by the crash, is relieved of duty.
I remember watching Walter get up and walk out of the room by himself. And, something inside of me was just, saying, this is not right, this is not right. Somebody's got to go with him.
Tony, he can't go out alone.
I could have been sitting there just as easy as him. And I don't know if I'd have done anything different than he did.
Helicopter news crews are quickly on the scene.
Using for medevacing.
There was a lot of fire in front of me, and my house was just totally on fire.
Frank! Angelica! Javier! Angelica!
And I saw my neighbor.
Where are they?
I said to her, "Rose, where's my family? What happened?" And she goes, "Oh, honey, your family's in here. They're over here. We're looking for you." And within myself, all I could do was thank God that they were safe and sound. She took me into her home, and I saw Alex.
Alex! Alex! What happened? Where's Angelica? Where's Angelica?
I don't know.
Where's Javier? Where's Papa?
I don't know, Mom. I'm sorry. I don't know, Mom.
And he started crying right away and said, "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm the only one that came out alive." And all I could do was hug him.
Pieces of fuselage have torn through nearby homes, setting them on fire. The tail section of the jet has been catapulted more than a block from the crash site.
Hello? Is there anybody in here?
As I surveyed the houses and the crash site around me, it was a very surreal experience to stand right there for probably 4 or 5 minutes before anybody else showed up and not see another living soul.
I have got wreckage all over the place. There are no survivors, just fatalities.
You know, I dealt with death on 1 or 2 or 3 people in a residential fire, but never a whole airliner full of people.
Let's go to work, guys.
I don't think I ever saw a whole human being. I gave him the job of finding body parts and wrapping them or covering them with yellow rescue blankets. No matter where it was, ever so small or whatever, you know, a hand or a torso or a leg or whatever. That became life to us. It was treated with respect. My memory of the incident is in a muted shade of brown. It's not black and white, it's not vivid color. You know, the grass isn't green, you know, the houses don't have paint. It's all some muted brown shade. And I'm told that that's my brain's way of taking something violent and horrible and softening it a little bit so I can live with it and deal with it.
This neighborhood has just been torn apart. Yellow sheets mark the bodies. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 bodies right now. Oh, gosh. This neighborhood has just been devastated.
16 houses have been damaged, many of them completely destroyed. At Los Angeles International Airport, Mary Wong is waiting for her husband and 2 young sons.
I went to the airport to pick them up around noon and waited in that area outside of customs and waited and probably, you know, you're thinking customs might take a little while, but about maybe 12:20 or 12:30, I started seeing a man walk around with a pack on his back with a green cross. We were taken up to a lounge upstairs, and on the elevator up, I looked at the man and I said, "They're dead." I said, "I just know they're gone."
In Cerritos, emergency workers are shocked by another grisly discovery. In the playground of a local school, they find the wreckage of a Piper Cherokee Archer. Remarkably intact, the plane's canopy is sliced off. Its 3 occupants are found still belted into their seats. William Kramer and his family are dead. All the passengers and crew on Aeromexico Flight 498 are also dead. In addition, 15 people on the ground have been killed. It's a horrifying situation. 2 planes have crashed into a California neighborhood. Something's gone terribly wrong in the skies above one of the busiest airports in the world. Now investigators have to find out exactly what happened. On the last day of August in 1986, a lazy Labor Day weekend is shattered by an enormous explosion. Two planes crash in LA County, destroying several houses. It's a grisly scene. Bodies are scattered throughout a devastated neighborhood. 82 people are dead. 15 people on the ground have been killed. Another 67 have died in the tangled wreckage of the 2 planes involved. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board arrive that night. They include experts in human performance, flight systems, and air traffic control. From the beginning, investigators are focused on the fact that there are 2 planes on the ground. It suggests a disturbing conclusion, that this was a mid-air collision.
The idea that this had been a mid-air collision was already conveyed to us before we even launched out of Hangar 6 back when we got to word. They saw 2 wreckages coming down, and that's the way it got conveyed to us.
With that idea in mind, John White and his team must painstakingly examine the wreckage.
It's more of now documenting where the major pieces were, and then looking at the pieces to see if you can determine how the aircraft, at what angle the aircraft may have come together at.
Propeller marks on the tail of the DC-9 and paint from the Piper Cherokee reveal how the planes crashed.
It looks like the Piper collided at the tail section of the DC-9, and the horizontal stabilizer came off. And once that happened, you could no longer control the pitch of the DC-9.
The descending DC-9 and the climbing Cherokee met at a 90-degree angle. Their combined speed was 450 kilometers an hour. The impact tore off the airliner's tail section. Discovering how the planes collided is the first step. The more important question to be answered is why. To piece together the tragedy, investigators examine the DC-9's flight data recorder. It helps them pinpoint the exact location and altitude of Aeromexico Flight 498. The DC-9 was inside the terminal control area, the controlled airspace of the Los Angeles airport. It was right where it was supposed to be. But the Kramer's Cherokee was also inside the TCA. With all of the jets taking off and landing at LAX, private planes must first get permission to enter this area.
Piper 4891, all clear for takeoff, Torrance.
William Kramer was a newcomer to Los Angeles, but investigators learned that he was well aware of the limits imposed by the TCA. He knew that it was restricted airspace. And in the cockpit of Kramer's Cherokee, the confirmation. Investigators find a map of the Los Angeles terminal control area. Investigators make another puzzling discovery. They learn that the Kramer's proposed flight plan took them from Torrance to Long Beach, then up to Ontario, and finally to Big Bear Lake at a cruising altitude of 3,000 meters. That plan keeps him well out of the TCA.
The fact of the matter is that the Cherokee flew into the TCA and hit the DC-9 in restricted airspace without a clearance.
So how had Kramer flown into danger? And why hadn't he let anyone know? On the ground in Cerritos, one possible answer emerges. Heart disease runs in Kramer's family, and the initial autopsy results show a major blockage.
Are you all right, Bill?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Kramer may have suffered a heart attack on the flight, leaving the plane without a pilot. Samples of William Kramer's heart tissue are sent to the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology for testing. If he suffered a heart attack, it might explain why he didn't call in to LA approach.
It's totally possible that he could have had the heart attack, fell back, pulled the airplane up, and that's why he didn't try and avoid the DC-9.
But no matter why Kramer was flying in restricted airspace, Air Traffic Controller Walter White should have been able to see him. Kramer's plane should have appeared on White's radar. Before being questioned by investigators, White reviews the radio calls from that morning. He needs to be sure of what he said and what he saw. Richard Wentworth was one of the investigators who talked to White.
At any time, did you see the Piper Cherokee on your scope?
No. No, sir. The Piper's target was not displayed. It is my belief that it was not on my radar scope.
He was positive that the aircraft was not there for him to see.
NTSB investigators aren't satisfied with White's memory. While the radar data is being analyzed, news arrives from the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology about William Kramer's heart.
Are you all right, Bill?
Results from a detailed study of his body show that while he had advanced heart disease, William Kramer was not fighting a heart attack before the collision. Investigators must find another explanation for why the Kramer's flight went into the Los Angeles terminal control area. While he had submitted a flight plan, small planes like Kramer's Cherokee don't have sophisticated instruments. Like most private pilots, Kramer was navigating by landmarks like freeways. That meant keeping an eye both on the landscape below and the airspace around him.
And that's definitely the 405. Where is it again?
Right there.
John Andrews is an aviation expert who testified about the circumstances of the Cerritos disaster.
The pilot of the Piper was navigating by visual landmarks, possibly attempting to follow parallel to a freeway, and that he had become confused about which freeway he should have been following.
New to California, perhaps bewildered by the tangle of freeways below him, Kramer may have flown into the terminal control area without knowing it.
There are no lines on the ground that says the TCA starts here and at this altitude. You have to look at a chart, you have to interpret that.
Investigators are now confident they can explain why Kramer was inside the controlled airspace of the TCA. But when he finally gets a look at the air traffic control radar record, Richard Wentworth is convinced that Walter White should have been able to see the Piper.
We were able to determine that the aircraft that collided with Aeromexico was there to be seen.
So why hadn't White reacted to the Kramer's plane if it was on his radar? When Walter White came to work that day, the arrival station was being controlled by Carl Grundman.
Hey, Carl, how's it going?
Hey, slow.
Grundman believes that long-standing radar problems were the reason White didn't see the Kramer's plane.
I can sit in for you.
Controllers have been complaining about the radars for a long time.
Yours, buddy.
All right, thanks a lot. Take care.
We had reported problems with the radar not picking up targets several times.
When radar signals strike a target, they bounce back to the receiver. But if buildings or mountains interrupt the radar, the return signal can disappear.
You may lose one target. You may lose two targets. It may not be presented for one sweep.
Did you see the Piper Cherokee on your scope?
No, sir.
But that doesn't mean that the target isn't there. A blind spot is only an instantaneous thing. It's not a continuous thing.
I think I lost one.
There were also holes that were just because the radar was old. It was just not as accurate as it might have been. It was not state-of-the-art equipment, that's for darn sure.
There's an effect called flicker. When a computer becomes overloaded, the scope will flicker. Every now and then, targets will drop out or can drop out. We reviewed that data. We had no evidence that there were any malfunctions of any systems in Los Angeles.
There is another possible explanation. If the Cherokee had appeared on the radar, White still could have missed it. Investigators focus on the other plane in the sky that day, the Grumman Tiger. Private planes are required to contact air traffic control if they're entering the terminal control area. But the Tiger was already deep into the TCA before it radioed Walter White.
One approach, 66 Romeo is on a flight from Fullerton. Cruising altitude is 4,500. We'd like following.
Grumman 66 Romeo, are you at 4,500 now?
Negative, we're at 3,400 and climbing.
Okay, you are right in the middle of the TCA, sir.
There was an aircraft that was east of the airport which he became involved in. That was what they called a violator.
Grumman 66 Romeo, I suggest in future you look at your TCA chart. You just had an aircraft pass.
The problem with the conversation between the controller and the pilot of the Grumman is that it went on too long.
Why were you so mesmerized by the Grumman?
I thought he posed a risk.
This occurred during a critical time at which the two aircraft to the southwest of his display, which was the Aeromexico and the Cherokee, were merging.
But even if the Cherokee's signal did appear on White's radar, and even if he had seen it, investigators discover that White still would not have had all the information he needed. Radar signals only show controllers that a plane is in range. Transponders on planes can broadcast other information, including height and speed. But at the site of the Cherokee wreckage, investigators discover the plane's transponder is a basic model. It only sends out information on the plane's direction. It provides no information about the plane's altitude.
So these controllers were pretty much used to seeing a little triangle which represented a VFR aircraft with no altitude readout, traversing all over the place. And unless they learned firsthand from the pilot, they had an expectation that the aircraft would not intrude into that airspace.
Grumman 66 Romeo, squawk 4524.
Investigators believe that White's divided attention, perhaps made worse by an older radar system, explains why air traffic control never warned the DC-9 of the danger posed by Kramer's Cherokee.
Any landmarks that we might be able to use as a visual.
But there's another mystery that hasn't been solved. Studying the radar records from the day, NTSB investigators are startled by what they find. Neither the crew of the DC-9 nor the pilot of the smaller Cherokee took any evasive action before the crash. Both pilots appear completely unaware of each other.
Definitely the 405.
Why hadn't the pilots of either airplane reacted? Visibility was over 20 kilometers. How could two planes collide in the clear blue sky? To try to get a better sense of what was happening inside the Aeromexico cockpit, Investigators listened to the airplane's cockpit voice recorder.
Los Angeles approach, this is Aeromexico 4.
The flight crew had put Walter White on their overhead speakers. The microphone for the cockpit voice recorder was right beside the speakers.
Depart Sealed Beach, heading 320.
Much of what the pilot said was drowned out by White's voice.
Reduce speed to 200, then descend and maintain 6,000.
Altimeter bugs.
The radar information paints a puzzling picture. It indicates that for more than a minute, the Kramer's Cherokee was there to be seen by the Aeromexico crew. And if the Kramers had looked out of their right side window, they would also have seen the Aeromexico jet. But neither plane altered its course. Neither plane took any action to avoid the deadly collision. Investigators believe that if William Kramer was indeed lost and using the freeways as a guide, he might never have seen the approaching DC-9. The window he would have been looking out of was the pilot's window, but the DC-9 was coming from the other direction.
A visual landmark that I can...
This would have been a very unfortunate situation because the DC-9 was approaching from the far right side and in fact could only be seen out the passenger's window, which was on the right side of the aircraft.
For the crew of the DC-9, the very size of the much smaller Cherokee could have prevented them from seeing the plane before it was too late.
In some cases, when the small aircraft is closing very rapidly, by the time the aircraft becomes large enough for you to easily see it, it's almost too late to avoid the collision. The FAA generally has taken a sort of as a rule of thumb that you need about 12 seconds in order to see an aircraft, decide that it's a threat, and then execute an avoidance maneuver. In the case of the collision at Cerritos, by the time the aircraft became large enough to see, you were down very close to that 12-second limit. In case after case of mid-air collisions, we find out that the aircraft gave no indication that they saw each other until the time they actually collided.
The design of the cockpit windshield may also have contributed to the disaster.
Hey, Maria. Everything okay?
It's possible that during part of the approach, at least for one of the pilots, the aircraft was actually behind the center post, and unless the pilot moved his head back and forth to clear that airspace, unless he had a reason to do that, it's possible the aircraft was obscured during part of the time in which he might have had a chance of seeing the other aircraft.
Ignition.
The disaster over Cerritos revealed several tragic weaknesses in the air traffic control system. One of the most glaring was that pilots could not be relied on to see and avoid each other. They'd need new technology to keep a mid-air collision from happening again. A small California neighborhood is rocked by a terrifying plane crash. 82 people are killed when a private plane slams into a large passenger jet. The devastation is enormous. More than a dozen houses are damaged, several leveled completely. The NTSB report makes it clear that there are glaring problems across the air traffic system. And these concerns must be addressed before, inevitably, there is another mid-air disaster. The FAA, which regulates the airline industry in the United States, acted swiftly to improve safety. A new kind of transponder was required for smaller planes, the kind that might have helped air traffic controllers recognize that the private aircraft posed a danger.
If you had an aircraft that flew under a controlled airspace, you would have a transponder and you would be required to have altitude encoding or reporting. That way it would be no mistake as to whether you had an intruder or not.
A new system called Mode C Intruder was also developed to warn air traffic controllers.
Mode C Intruder is an automated program that is now incorporated in all our major radar facilities, that if an aircraft should inadvertently intrude, the controller will now be given a visual and an oral alert, thus giving him time to provide a timely warning to the pilot.
In-range check. Seatbelts, engine ignition.
Even for the most diligent pilot, the old strategy of see and avoid had serious limitations. Those limitations would be addressed with the most important innovation of all.
The major technological innovation that came out of the Cerritos midair was the congressional mandate that all air carrier aircraft operating within the United States would be outfitted with TCAS, Traffic Collision and Avoidance System.
John Andrews worked on the team that developed TCAS.
The TCAS collision avoidance system, which was under development, quite possibly could have prevented this accident. TCAS gives the pilot a traffic advisory at 45 seconds before the potential collision.
Hey, Maria. Everything okay back there?
And then at approximately 25 seconds or so before the potential collision, a resolution advisory is given to actually tell the pilots to climb or descend to avoid the altitude of the other aircraft.
See. Today, commercial airlines around the world use TCAS. The pilot of the Grumman Tiger, the so-called third pilot whose actions may have played a part in the crash, was eventually charged for flying into controlled airspace in a careless and reckless manner. For Walter White, the effect of the disaster over Cerritos could not be overcome.
Walter came back to the TRACON, and I think it was probably a month or so later. And I can't give you exactly how long he stayed there, but it wasn't very long. And he just got up and said, no, thank you. And as far as I know, he didn't talk to airplanes again.
Within a year of the incident, the old radars at LAX were replaced. In Cerritos, a memorial garden now marks the day of the disaster. Mary Wong has since remarried, but the pain of returning home that day will never go away.
There's nobody here. The house is empty. Derek was already living in an apartment in San Diego, and here I was no longer a mother, except to Derek, and I was no longer a wife. And so it shattered my whole world.
Days after the disaster, Mary Wong met one of the few people who could fully understand her loss.
I went to the memorial service, and it was very important to me to try to meet somebody else who had gone through this. And I knew from reading stories that Teresa had lost her husband and 2 children. And so I saw someone there who I thought was Teresa.
She says, "Are you Teresa Estrada?" And I said, "Yes, I am." She says, "Well, my name is Mary Wong." And she says,
I said, "I lost my husband and children also."
I just wanted to grab her and hug her because she was feeling what I was feeling.
So we had an immediate connection, and we've maintained our friendship over these 20 years.
Everyone who flies today has been affected by the mid-air collision over Cerritos. The disaster led to historic improvements in aviation safety. Since the full adoption of the TCAS system, there has not been another mid-air collision in the United States. Morning rush hour, Charlotte, North Carolina. Its busy airport is rocked by a massive explosion.
The flames were coming over the fence, just total craziness. Everybody was just running for their lives.
Firefighters rush to one of the airport's main hangars. They confront an inferno.
It was quite a while before we realized a plane had hit the hangar.
A packed commuter flight has plunged to the ground shortly after takeoff. Everyone on board is killed.
We kept scratching our head wondering, okay, this airplane flew 9 times previously and we had no problems.
Investigators uncover a string of errors.
Bill, I have an idea.
And learn that passengers on small planes have actually been in danger for years. It's morning on January the 8th, 2003, in Charlotte, North Carolina. A city of 500,000 wakes. At Charlotte Douglas International Airport, commercial airline pilot Captain Katie Leslie is at work early. Only 25 years old, this Texas native has been flying for Air Midwest for almost 3 years. One of the youngest flight captains at her airline.
Hey, Tom. Have a great flight.
She's a top-rated pilot building her career at one of the fastest-growing airports in the United States. This airport is an important domestic hub for U.S. Airways, with flights to most major cities in the eastern United States. Air Midwest runs a commuter service as U.S. Airways Express. It operates a fleet of Beechcraft 1900D planes, a 19-passenger short-haul commuter plane, and a trusted workhorse in the industry. Today, Captain Leslie is in command of a 1900D on a 30-minute hop to Greenville-Spartanburg Airport in Greer, North Carolina. Her co-pilot is 27-year-old Jonathan Gibbs.
How'd you sleep last night?
Had a dream I was in Miami.
Attention, ladies and gentlemen, this is the final boarding call for Air Midwest Flight 5481 to Greenville-Spartanburg. All passengers wishing to board should make their way to gate.
Among the passengers flying to Greer this morning, 18-year-old Christiana Shepard. Christiana's parents, Doug and Teresa, are Baptist missionaries working in the Portuguese Azores.
Christiana left the 7th of January from the Azores, spent the night in the airport in Boston, and then flew the next morning on the early flight from Boston to Charlotte to Greenville. So she was on her way back to college.
Christiana was very special, and she was one that would come up and give you a hug and say, you know, she'd come for no reason. She would give you a hug and say, Dad, I love you.
At 8 in the morning, Christiana boards her flight. Meanwhile, as part of their standard checklist before takeoff, the crew calculates the weight of all the baggage, passengers, and fuel on the plane. That's to make sure the plane isn't overweight, and the weight is spread evenly. It's a calculation that's made on all commercial aircraft.
So we got a full house back there?
You can count 19 people in the back. Don't know the bags yet.
Okay.
But baggage handlers raise concerns that the luggage they're loading may be too heavy.
Damn. Captain, how many we gotta take off?
We're figuring it out.
Cool. 17,018.
17,120 as our weight, huh?
Yeah, is our max.
So, we're cool.
So, yeah.
Good morning. Welcome aboard U.S. Airways Express service to Greenville, Spartanburg. It's a very short flight, maybe 30 minutes gate to gate, so sit back, relax, and we'll have you there in a few minutes.
Before takeoff, the crew checks the flight controls, including the rudder and elevator, which help control the direction of the plane.
Flight controls, free and correct.
Air Midwest 5481, runway 18 right. Taxi into position and hold.
Captain Leslie is moments from takeoff. On the runway ahead of them is a Bombardier CRJ ready for departure.
That CRJ sure is a good-looking plane, isn't it?
Yeah, wish I was flying it.
With powerful turbulence released from the CRJ, Captain Leslie must keep a safe distance.
They're gonna blast us with his jet blasts.
Air Midwest 5481, turn right heading 230. Cleared for takeoff.
Set takeoff power, please.
Power is set. 80 knots, cross-checked.
At 80 knots, pilots check that key instruments are working. With no signs of trouble, Leslie and Gibbs proceed with their takeoff. To air traffic control, Flight 5481's takeoff roll is perfectly normal.
Gear up.
What?
But without warning, the plane's nose pitches dramatically upward from 7 to a staggering 54 degrees.
Oh, help me! You got it?
The crew struggles to get the nose back down again. Airflow over the top of the wings creates lift. But if the nose keeps rising, air won't flow smoothly over the plane's wings. The plane will lose its lift, stall, and plunge from the sky.
Push the nose down! Oh my God! We have an emergency on Air Midwest 5481.
Alert 3 standby, runway 18 right.
The controller handling Flight 5481 calls for emergency equipment.
Oh my God.
The plane is now 350 meters from the ground. It stalls, rolls to the left, and begins falling from the sky. Captain Leslie pulls on her control column with all her might. If she can't get the plane to climb, she's going to hit the ground. Air traffic controllers watch as a 19-passenger plane plunges towards the Earth. Captain Katie Leslie struggles desperately to get her plane to climb, but it won't respond. The plane heads towards a packed U.S. Airways hangar. The flight was loaded with almost 1,000 kilograms of highly flammable jet fuel just before takeoff. The impact instantly ignites all that fuel. Now the intense fire threatens to engulf the hangar. There are several airplanes and hundreds of people working inside.
Fire station, emergency? Engine crash. The plane is crashed. Yes, at the U.S. Air Maintenance Parade, right toward the building, there's a fire.
Code 10, aircraft crash, south end of runway 36 left. I repeat, a confirmed aircraft crash on fire.
38-year-old Fire Chief Keith Rogers is driving to work when he gets a Code 10 call.
Code 10 means that there's a confirmed plane crash. Usually, this type of call is a once-in-a-career type of incident.
Cindy Overcash is a firefighter with the Charlotte Fire Department.
You couldn't actually see the hangar from here, but you just saw a huge black plume of smoke. And we knew, something really bad is here.
In the adjacent building, sales director David Isola hears the explosion.
Well, I was sitting at my desk and I heard this loud boom. And one of the guys came in from next door and said that he just saw an airplane crash. And so I hopped in my truck and drove down to the site.
From 60 meters away, Isola records the opening moments of the tragedy.
There was a lot of smoke, and it was just like hell. It looked just like hell. The flames were coming over the fence, just total craziness. Everybody was just running for their lives.
When Chief Keith Rogers arrives at the scene, he finds himself swimming upstream against a mob in panic.
As I got onto the airport property and got onto the tarmac, the people were exiting the hangar. Those people were running out in front of the fire trucks, the fire cars, so we had to drive with caution. They were getting out of the building as fast as they could, because I think they definitely realized that this was not a drill, this was a real emergency.
And we still weren't sure if we had a plane inside the hangar that had caught on fire, or if the hangar had caught on fire. It was quite a while before we realized a plane had hit the hangar.
Chief Rogers immediately takes command of the scene. He knows that there are aircraft parked inside the flaming hangar. Their fuel tanks threaten to blow.
And our concern was, one, about the people that were on board the aircraft, two, for the people that were working in the hangar, and three, we had to worry about the airplanes that were in for repair were those aircraft on fire. So we had a lot of major issues to deal with.
Within minutes, firefighters begin to get the inferno under control. The hope now is that somewhere inside the wreck, survivors are clinging to life.
The main thing probably was on anybody's mind once we realized what we had was survivors.
Chief Rogers sends a line of firefighters led by Cindy Overcash into the heart of the inferno. Cindy Overcash and two of her team make their way into the wreckage, carefully putting out spot fires along the way.
As we walk up on to see the fire and we see what we think are crash test dummies, we thought a plane had blown up inside and blew their training dummies out. And then it dawned on me. That's not a training dummy.
It took them a few minutes to determine exactly what was happening, and once they did that, it was obvious that there were no survivors.
It's a total loss. All 19 passengers, as well as Captain Leslie and First Officer Gibbs, are dead.
At about 8:53 this morning, we had an aircraft accident. It had 19 passengers and 2 crew. There are no survivors.
And we hope that we never have to respond to a situation with such a large loss of life, but that is our job. This is some of the most difficult duty and task that a firefighter will ever do in their career.
For medics and rescue workers, the ordeal is over. But for friends and family of the victims, the anguish has just begun.
I was walking through the living room, and I stopped and said, my heart's beating right now just the way it was then. Said, has Christiana called yet? She said, no. Okay, and I knew then what had happened. I knew. So I went and got the telephone and called the school. He said, yes, Mrs. Shepard, we have some sad news. And he told me that the plane had crashed on takeoff. I asked if there were any survivors. He said no. So then I knew I had to go tell Doug, and he was in the garage.
Yeah, it's something you never forget about. I was changing a fluorescent bulb, and Teresa came to the doorway.
How do you say that? You use words every single day. How can you use words to ruin someone's life? But I told him, I said, Doug, Christiana's plane crashed.
At that moment, my world fell apart.
Now the Shepards and the families of the other 20 victims want to know what caused the deaths of their loved ones. It's been almost 5 hours since Flight 5481 crashed into a hangar in Charlotte, North Carolina. With no survivors to rescue, neither bodies nor airplane parts are moved from where they fell until the arrival of investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board. While medical examiners mark the location of human remains in red, NTSB investigators mark scraps of metal in yellow, looking for clues to help them figure out what happened aboard Flight 5481. Among those assigned to this case, lead investigator Lorinda Ward. This is her first assignment as the lead investigator of a crash. But today, she's not feeling her best.
That day, I was a little bit under the weather. I was fighting off a cold. You have the adrenaline that shoots through your body at the time, and so that actually makes up for when you're not feeling well. And I knew that the other people on my team were experienced, so I felt comfortable going to Charlotte.
At Charlotte Douglas Airport, Ward takes the first steps towards solving this accident.
I checked in with the fire department to make sure that the fires had been put out, and then called a meeting with all the first responders to see what they had noticed when they came to the crash site.
Ward acts fast. Because there are bodies entangled with the wreckage, she declares the crash site a potential biohazard. Investigators who might come in contact with the wreckage must wear protective suits while they examine the wreck and identify the victims' remains.
When we arrived on scene, the accident site did not look like an airplane was there. Due to the fire, the post-crash fire, when you initially walked up to it, it was hard to identify that you had an airplane that could hold 21 people.
While work continues at the crash site,
All right, let's go.
Lorinda Ward and her team look for clues nearby.
We had the folks go shoulder to shoulder on the runway that the accident crew took off on to pick up anything that they saw on the runway to see if it had any relevance to the accident investigation.
Runways must be clear of all debris. The smallest object can become a deadly projectile if it strikes a plane on takeoff. 3 years earlier, a Concorde jet ran over a 40-centimeter strip of scrap metal on a Paris runway. The plane's fuel tank was pierced and caught fire. The aircraft rose to 200 meters before it crashed into a nearby hotel. 109 people on board and 4 people on the ground were killed. At Charlotte Douglas International, investigators scour the area. they find a fuel cap lying dangerously close to the runway.
What do we got?
It could be sucked in and it could damage an engine. The main part would be the damage that it could do to an engine.
The discovery raises an interesting possibility. As Flight 5481 raced down the runway at takeoff, the fuel cap bounced up off the tarmac, struck the engine rotors, and brought Captain Leslie's aircraft crashing to Earth.
This was to be brought back to see if it had any relevance to the accident investigation, whether it came off the airplane itself or if it could have done some type of damage to the airplane.
A closer examination leads Ward and her team to conclude that the fuel cap could not have interfered with the propellers. Investigators discover no other relevant debris on the runway. The runway debris theory is ruled out. Now, NTSB air traffic control investigator Bill English explores another scenario.
When we first heard about the accident, it looked like there might be the possibility that we'd want to look at a wake turbulence encounter.
The wings of a fast-moving jet disturb the air around them, creating a trail of violently swirling air. NASA tests decades earlier had illustrated the power and danger of wake turbulence to other planes.
We had to see, did another airplane depart before it? That's where wake turbulence hazard would come from. And we wanted to look at what kind of airplane departed ahead of it. Larger, heavier airplanes are the more risky wake turbulence creating airplanes.
Bill English examines radar records from the time of the accident. He learns that a much heavier Bombardier regional jet, a CRJ, took off moments before the beach.
The CRJ sure is a good-looking plane, isn't it?
Yeah, wish I was flying it.
The wake turbulence is generated from the wingtips of any airplane. As soon as it starts to lift off the ground, it makes what people sometimes call horizontal tornadoes, vortexes of air that can create hazardous turbulence.
Runway 18 right. Taxi into position.
Air traffic controllers do have standard procedures for spacing out airplanes so that they have a chance to avoid the wake turbulence or let the wake dissipate.
1 year earlier, an American Airlines jet taking off from New York encountered wake turbulence. The plane crashed into a residential neighborhood. 260 people on the plane and 5 people on the ground were killed.
You're gonna blast us with his jet blasts.
Air Midwest 5481, cleared for takeoff.
Air traffic investigator Bill English must now determine if wake turbulence from the CRJ caused Flight 5481 to crash. Bill English studies the flight path of Captain Leslie's plane and finds it consistent with a plane flying into wake turbulence.
A pitch up is not unheard of in a wake turbulence encounter where the airplane will suddenly go nose up and the crew has trouble to counter that and get the nose back where it belongs.
English needs to know how close the Air Midwest flight got to the larger jet. The Charlotte Tower has a sophisticated computer system that tracks the movement of planes while they're still on the ground. The system gave Bill English his answer.
That system had a very rapid update, so we could see exactly where on the runway and at what time the regional jet lifted off compared to when the accident airplane started its roll.
When Bill English plots the precise position of the planes at liftoff, he makes a telling discovery. Even though both planes used the same runway, their paths never crossed.
The RJ started lifting off much farther down the runway than the accident airplane did, and the climb-out angle of the regional jet and the climb-out angle of the accident airplane never intersected. The angle of the accident airplane was very steep. It really had no possibility of intersecting the wake turbulence from the regional jet. So if our airplane lifted off and climbed above the angle of the previous airplane, we knew then that it couldn't possibly be a factor.
The wake vortex theory is ruled out, and Bill English's work is done. Now it's up to Ward and her crew to find clues in the burnt-out wreckage of the plane. Within 2 days, her investigation will reveal a string of errors and faulty assumptions that has been putting tens of thousands of passengers at risk for years. Within hours of the crash, investigators find the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder from Air Midwest Flight 5481. The recorders are designed to withstand temperatures of up to 1100 degrees Celsius. In this crash, parts of the voice recorder had actually melted. The devices are photographed and sent for analysis. Then, amongst the tons of debris on the ground, investigators discover the shredded remains of the elevator control cables. Vital to flight control, these cables link the pilot's control columns to the flight elevator, an aerodynamic panel that helps pilots climb and descend. Turnbuckles keep the cables taut. To climb, pilots pull on the column. The cables pull the elevator up, forcing the nose to rise. To descend, pilots push on the control column. The cables tilt the elevator down, and the nose falls. But as investigators examine the burnt-out cables and turnbuckles on Captain Leslie's plane, already something looks wrong.
They looked unusual. They weren't in like the normal position that you would find them. In this case, we had one adjusted all the way out, and then one adjusted all the way in. So those were set aside for us to look at later.
While the lab work continues, NTSB investigator Stephen Carbone travels to Huntington, Virginia. He interviews mechanics who worked on the plane the day before the crash.
It's all there. At the time, we had known that it had just come out of a detail check, which is a routine check. And knowing that, we were looking into the possibility that something had been done during the check that needed to be looked at from an investigation point of view. The cables needed servicing. My guy wrote up a service order, and I put him on it. Don't forget the manual. Got it.
Every 1,200 flight hours, Air Midwest planes go in for routine maintenance work. This includes adjusting the cables that control the plane's elevator.
In the process of doing this check, he found that the mechanic had found that the cables were out of limits. So he had written up that he was going to check the cable tensions and then adjust them as per the manual. Everything's ready?
The mechanics tell Carbone that the work was checked and stamped for quality assurance.
They believe that the aircraft was properly rigged as per the manual.
At first glance, that belief appears to be right. After maintenance, this Beech aircraft took off and landed 9 times without incident before Captain Leslie took the helm. Investigators turned to the flight data recorder to learn what happened on those flights. The flight data recorder stores data from numerous flights, both before and after the plane's cables were adjusted. No one on any of those flights had encountered any problems with the plane's elevator.
So at the time, we didn't know how that affected the airplane because it had flown 9 times successfully before the accident flight.
Ward also discovers that the crew tested their elevator controls before Flight 5481 took off.
Flight controls, free and correct.
Air Midwest 5481.
Ward and her team dig deeper, looking to discover if the unusual configuration of the elevator cables could have played a role in this crash. What they find strikes at the very heart of what went wrong. Normally, both turnbuckles are almost exactly the same length. But on Captain Leslie's plane, one turnbuckle is noticeably longer than the other. To establish the correct cable tension, mechanics tighten the turnbuckles. But too much tightening of a turnbuckle shortens the cables and cuts the range of motion of the elevator control. The elevator should be able to tilt to a nose-down position of 14 degrees. But their downward range has actually been cut in half to only 7 degrees. The result is deadly. As the flight got underway, the nose pitched up as expected during takeoff.
What?
Push the nose down! Oh my God!
But the reduced range in the elevator made it impossible for the pilots to bring the nose down again.
Due to the adjustment that had been done in the maintenance a few nights earlier, there was nothing that the crew could have done at that time.
Unable to bring the nose down, the pitch of the wings became too pronounced. With no air flowing over the top of the wings, the plane lost its lift and began falling from the sky. The pilot's struggle with the elevator helps explain why Flight 5481 crashed that day. Somehow, the elevator cables were improperly adjusted. The pilots simply could not control the pitch of their airplane. Stephen Carbone wants to know how mechanics had made such a critical mistake.
Yeah, I see that here.
He goes back to the hangar to question the mechanics on duty that night. And this time, they tell him a different story.
Most of the guys were just learning the ropes.
The mechanics working on the airline were subcontractors to the contract company. And the mechanics working on the aircraft that night had limited experience on the Beech 1900D. And the person performing the rig was receiving training that night on that specific task.
Once you have the rig pin set, adjust the turnbuckle barrels for more tension in the cable.
Yeah, I see that here.
Adjusting the elevator cables is not a simple process. It's a time-consuming procedure that involves 25 different steps.
Got it. What about the other steps?
Yeah, don't worry about those. Just check the cable tension when you're done, and we're good. That's it.
The quality assurance inspector and the mechanic took it upon themselves to decide which steps to perform because they felt that the steps they were performing were the only ones necessary to get the task done.
The mechanic skipped 9 steps that night. One of those involved manipulating the elevator through its full range of motion. Had the mechanic tried to do that, he would have noticed that the elevator's motion was restricted by cables that had been improperly rigged.
If they had followed the steps as described in the manual, they would have found the problems that had come up.
But there was an inspector supervising the work. Carbone discovers that the inspector was actually the person teaching the mechanics how to do the work.
The problem was that the quality assurance inspector was actually acting as an instructor. So he was taking the mechanic through the process of the job task and teaching him how to do the rig. Well, when you put yourself in that position, you're actually doing the task because even as a teacher, you're performing the task. And then he came in behind himself and then signed off as an inspector what he had done.
When I found out that this mechanic had skipped procedures, I was upset. The procedures that affected our lives, that affected the lives of 21 people, 21 families were destroyed. Because you never get over something like this.
The Shepherds sue the airline. They also demand something unheard of in U.S. aviation, an apology.
They wanted more than just to achieve a just settlement in monetary terms. They had a need to press the issues that humanize and put a face on the people who are the victims of these tragedies.
The Shepherds believe that their best chance of getting an apology is by putting a face to Christiana's name.
So we decided to take this picture and to send it to those people that were involved in the accident, in the investigation, so that Christiana would not be just a number or a seat number or a ticket number or a settlement amount, so that they could actually see that she was a person.
The legal journey began when we determined that we wanted the apology, that we wanted someone to say, we really blew this. We assumed the airline would apologize. We had no idea that airlines don't apologize. If they did something wrong, obviously you should stand up and say, we are so sorry that we messed up in this and we're fixing this.
In this case, the mechanics thought they were doing something that was perfectly reasonable. They thought this was, another day at the job. And then to come to find out that now 21 people have been, killed due to their inadvertent act.
For Lorinda Ward and her team, it looks like they've found the problem. But something still doesn't add up. Why didn't the problem with the plane's faulty rigging surface on any of its previous flights?
We kept scratching our head wondering, okay, this airplane flew 9 times previously and we had no problems. So we're trying to decide, well, what was unusual about this flight?
Ward has to figure out what happened in the hours and minutes before the crash.
And did you notice anything unusual before takeoff?
Well, it was sitting low when it taxied out. It looked heavy.
We had a couple of witnesses that were implying that we had a very heavily loaded airplane. The baggage people said that it was hard to shut the door because they thought bags were going to come out.
Each plane has a maximum weight it can handle before the engines can't get it off the ground. Before takeoff, it's the pilot's job to calculate the onboard weight.
We got a full house back there?
How many we gotta take off?
We're figuring it out.
The crew of Flight 5481 did perform that calculation.
Cool, 17018.
We heard them on the CVR going through the numbers to make sure that they'd have their center of gravity within the range for them to take off.
17120 is our weight, huh?
Yeah, as our max.
On any plane, large or small, the weight of cargo and passengers has to be distributed evenly. The balancing point of an airplane is called its center of gravity. For a plane to fly safely, it can neither be too far forward nor too far back or aft.
So, we're cool.
So, yeah.
We don't think we're gonna have to take anything off.
Air Midwest pilots are instructed how to make weight and center of gravity, or CG, calculations. They use average weights to make that calculation, 175 pounds per passenger and 20 pounds per bag.
They knew that they had a very aft CG, but due to using the average weights and average calculations, the paperwork showed them being within the range that they needed to take off.
But Ward needs to know if the plane really was within the proper range of weight and balance to take off.
But what we did is we looked at the weights of the actual baggage itself that was on board and then the weight of the passengers and the crew.
Technicians weigh the remains of the burnt luggage from the wreckage site.
Doctor, yes, could you tell me, please, what the last recorded weight of your patient is, please?
And obtain the real weight of passengers on board that day.
212. Thank you.
When all the numbers are in, Ward discovers the real weight of Flight 5481 is 17,700 pounds, some 580 pounds over its maximum takeoff weight.
They would not have been able to take off if they had used actual weights. They would have had to pull either passengers or bags off.
Because of the higher than expected weight of the passengers and baggage on the flight, and the large number of bags stowed in the rear, the airplane was tail heavy. its center of gravity ever so slightly too far to the rear, which wasn't a problem until the landing gear was raised.
Gear up.
When the gear's weight moved backwards from the nose, it tipped the balance of weight too far back. The pilot's efforts to regain control of the aircraft were futile, crippled by the airplane's defective elevator controls.
When the nose gear moved aft, they lost the ability to control the aircraft because all the weight went back and they had no elevator movement enough to bring the nose back down. And at the height that they were at, they had no recovery.
The passengers and crew of Flight 5481 were doomed the moment the plane left the ground. They had no way of knowing that two unrelated problems would combine to bring down their plane.
This was just a normal routine flight for them, and they did all the pre-flight checks, they did their weight and balance, they did the correct calls, they're on the right runway. It was just another day at the job, and they didn't know that they had these two hidden, latent failures that were waiting for them.
But faulty maintenance and above-average weights weren't the only issues uncovered by Lorinda Ward's investigation.
Hey, you got a sec? I have an idea.
Lorinda Ward suspects she's uncovered problems that didn't just affect this one flight, but that also affected every commuter plane in the air. NTSB investigators say that every plane crash makes flying safer. Flight 5481 was no exception. 14 months after the accident, lead investigator Lorinda Ward and her team file a comprehensive report to ensure the mistakes that killed those aboard Flight 5481 are never repeated. Among Ward's recommendations, that the FAA review its average passenger and baggage weights, an average that had not been revised since 1936. And since studies suggest that Americans and other adults were getting heavier from year to year, Ward suspected that the averages were off.
We made a recommendation to the FAA to have the operators go out and survey their operations both summer and winter time to see how accurate these average weights reflected the actual flying public that was getting onto their airplanes.
After conducting a survey of passengers, the FAA comes to a shocking conclusion. The average weight of adult American passengers was 195 pounds, not 175. The FAA also discovered that the average weight of carry-on luggage was being underestimated by 5 pounds per bag.
We had an average weight that were being used that needed to be updated.
Had these higher average weights been in effect on January the 8th, 2003, Flight 5481 would not have been legal for takeoff. Captain Leslie would have had to remove bags and passengers.
48107. Cool. 17018.
Air Midwest pilots now use an average weight of 200 pounds per passenger, which means that their Beechcraft planes can only carry 17 passengers, not 19. But Ward's report goes on to say that even with updated industry averages, there's still room for error. Her report states that flying small aircraft will be safest only when airlines stop using average weight assumptions altogether and calculate the real weight on board before takeoff. New technologies are being developed to allow air carriers to measure actual weight and control balance in real time as the plane is loaded. Knowing the actual weight of passengers and baggage is vital. More and more people are flying on small commuter jets. As the cost of jet fuel soars, the smaller fuel-efficient planes become more attractive to airlines. In the United States alone, more than 10 million people a year board planes with fewer than 30 seats.
Smaller aircraft are more sensitive to the weight and balance issue than, say, a larger airplane.
In spite of Ward's recommendations and the available technology, almost 70% of small planes on scheduled flights still use average instead of actual weights. For Doug and Teresa Shepard, there is still another danger that threatens to strike again.
If the FAA took a very active role in their regulation, then subcontracting could actually be a plus. The way it's handled today, the mistakes will just continue.
What about the other steps?
Yeah, don't worry about those. Just check the cable tension when you're done, and we're good.
In her report, Ward states that all air carriers need to provide direct oversight to make sure that even subcontracted work is completed correctly.
This investigation was unique to me personally because it was my first launch as an investigator in charge. This was, in my mind, a significant investigation in the fact that we had the 22 safety recommendations that came out from a small accident investigation.
For the Shepards, the NTSB recommendations come too late. But after a lengthy legal battle, Air Midwest does deliver a rare and formal apology for the mistakes that cost 18-year-old Christiana Shepard her life.
My name is Ron Goldman, and my role here today is I will be introducing the public apology, and then I'll have a few remarks. The public apology is, in aviation cases, unprecedented.
We are here today to remember the victims of Flight 5481 and to offer our apologies, our condolences, and sincere sympathy to the surviving family members of the passengers and crew who perished in the January 8, 2003 crash of Air Midwest Flight number 5481.
The acceptance of accountability suggests that the recommendations made by the safety investigators are not to be taken as a book to throw in a drawer and forget about, but are to be taken seriously, because if you don't take them seriously, there's going to be public accountability as well as private accountability.
What people should never forget is that as we're going about and doing our job day to day, we need to remember the importance of doing our job. Doesn't matter where we're at on the ladder or the corporate ladder, whether we're at the bottom rung or the top rung, we have responsibilities.
It took a complicated string of errors and miscalculations to bring down Flight 5481. But some believe there was one person who performed admirably that day, Captain Katie Leslie. With an unbalanced plane and faulty controls, Captain Leslie could not have saved the flight. But her final actions may have saved some lives.
You know, she's an unsung hero to me because I don't think many people know about what she did and how she was fighting it and trying to pull the plane away from the hangar. And she actually did. She kept it from really more of a head-on hit into the hangar. Which probably saved countless other people from perishing that day.
It was firefighter Cindy Overcash who found the body of Captain Katie Leslie among the wreckage. To this day, Overcash still feels a special connection to the young pilot.
I don't know, I just felt a kinship. I don't know why. I don't know, you know, it could be as simple as I found her. And I was there when she left this world. I don't know, but I thought about her a lot.
Lorinda Ward's investigation could have ended when she uncovered the errors that caused the crash of Flight 5481. By digging a bit deeper, she made flying safer for millions of people. New York City's LaGuardia Airport, March the 22nd, 1992. A commuter plane with 51 people on board tries to lift off the runway.
Rotate.
But the pilots can't get it to climb.
They knew they were in trouble, but they were fighting all the way to the end.
US Air Flight 405 plunges into the icy waters of Flushing Bay. 27 people die. For US investigators, it's an open and shut case.
This accident was not a huge surprise to us.
But Canadian investigators are stunned. They know the New York accident should never have happened.
My reaction when I heard about it was, my God, it's Dryden all over again.
3 years earlier, an exhaustive investigation into a crash at a remote northern airport had identified a killer and spelled out ways to keep it from striking again.
Certainly, if they had followed the recommendations in my report, the F-28 crash at LaGuardia could have been averted.
The LaGuardia accident makes one thing clear. The right people never got the warning. March the 10th, 1989. It's 11:39 a.m. at Dryden, Ontario's airport. Light snow falls as Air Ontario Flight 1363 stops in the remote northern community on its way from Thunder Bay to Winnipeg. The passengers stay on board while the plane is refueled. For flight attendant Sonia Hartwick and the crew aboard the Fokker F-28, it's been a frustrating day of delays.
Big, fluffy, white snowflakes at this time were falling gently to the ground, and it was very, very gray. And I thought, I guess this means we're going to be delayed again.
I can't see us making it to Winnipeg on time.
It's Friday, the beginning of March break. Already an hour behind schedule, another delay could jeopardize the vacation plans of many of the 69 passengers and crew.
There was a lot of families traveling on board with plans. Most of them were going skiing, and so they were very concerned about meeting their connections in Winnipeg.
Kenora Dryden, it's Ontario 363.
Ontario 363, Kenora. We've got quite a...
As First Officer Keith Mills checks on weather conditions, Captain George Morwood returns from making a phone call inside the airport.
It's getting worse. What's the latest?
And it won't clear till late afternoon.
Check that. Quite heavy snow. Looks like it's going to be a bad one. It's still within our takeoff limits.
Well, that's good. We got a lot of people who want to make their connectors. Let's hope it holds.
Temperatures hover around freezing. Visibility is decreasing. If the flight doesn't leave soon, it could be grounded indefinitely.
Dryden is a very small city. It's a very remote part of Ontario.
With a population of about 6,500, the isolated community lies halfway between Thunder Bay and Winnipeg. Harsh Canadian winters with bitter cold reaching minus 35 degrees Celsius are the norm here. It's not the place to be stranded in the middle of a snowstorm. Royal Canadian Mounted Police Officer Don Crawshaw and his partner are escorting a prisoner to Winnipeg.
When we did a criminal check on the prisoner before we left, he came up as a violent person. So two of us had to go with him. He was wanted in Banff on a fraud charge, and that's what he was being brought back to Alberta for.
Hey, no smoking and seatbelts.
On.
Instruments.
Synced. Cross-check.
Captain Morwood uses the power of engine number 2, already running, to fire engine number 1. Morwood and Mills are both highly experienced pilots. However, they've each flown fewer than 100 hours in the Fokker F-28. The multi-million-dollar aircraft is the first Air Ontario jet to serve the remote northern Ontario region. 24 minutes after landing in Dryden, Flight 1363 is ready to leave.
Inform Kenora, we're rolling.
We're fired up, taxiing for departure, requesting airways to Winnipeg.
Hang on a sec, guys. Is there a chance that plane can hold? We're having some bad weather up here.
An approaching aircraft's urgent request to land
Unbelievable.
gives Captain Morwood little choice. He delays takeoff.
Okay, 363 is holding short of the active.
We are going to be a few moments until a small plane lands safely. We're sorry, folks. This just isn't our day.
In the 2 years that I had flown with Air Ontario, I'd never come across anything like this before.
The Cessna 150 lands safely, clearing the runway for Flight 1363's departure.
Tell them we're going immediately.
Kenora, Ontario, we're taxiing out at this time, 363 Dryden.
Finally, an hour behind schedule, the plane taxis to runway 29.
As we're going down the runway to position for takeoff, a blanket of snow was falling and I couldn't see the tree line anymore. It was like looking through a sheer.
Folks, we're sorry for the delay. Flight attendants, please be seated for takeoff.
At 12:09 p.m., Flight 1363 is ready for takeoff.
Advise Kenora, we're ready to proceed.
And Kenora, Dryden, Ontario, 363 is about to roll 29 at Dryden.
Ontario 363, Kenora, roger.
Captain Morwood performs a brief engine run-up, heating the engines to rid them of any accumulated snow and ice. Then he begins his roll down the runway.
When we're taking off, I'm usually very quiet and focused, meticulously going through a checklist in my own mind. What would I do in the case of an emergency?
E1.
The F-28 reaches its takeoff speed.
Rotate.
80 knots.
Our takeoff was very slow and sluggish, like a slow, sluggish person running up a hill.
Clearly, there's something wrong. The F-28 struggles to get airborne.
We cleared the trees. The plane started shaking.
I thought, oh my God, we're gonna crash.
That's when all hell broke loose. If you can equate to being in a Mixmaster, that's what the plane felt like at the time.
There's this dip to the left and then dip to the right. The pilot's trying to get this plane up.
Then all of a sudden there was a power burst. The plane seemed to stabilize itself.
You could feel that the pilot's trying to get control of it.
But a few seconds later, it became a Mixmaster again.
I yelled out, emergency, grab your ankles, get your heads down.
Grab your ankles, get your heads down!
And I kept yelling that, and then I assumed my brace position. You could hear people screaming and yelling. There's loud, horrible sounds. We are clearly crashing.
The pilots are helpless. 49 seconds after lifting off, Air Ontario Flight 1363 crash lands in the bush, 950 meters west of runway 29.
There was carnage of the aircraft all over the place. I didn't know where I was. And at that point, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm alive. I'm still alive, that this is all happening so quickly.
When we crashed, we came down on an angle. It ripped the right side of the plane open, and that's how we got out, or else we probably would have never gotten out. Now, the prisoner was still in handcuffs, so I reached over and I took the cuffs off of him there, but he never left me. And then we exited the aircraft.
There's fire all around, there's explosions. I'm thinking, oh my God, we're full of fuel.
Guys, come this way.
And I started yelling, come this way, for people to follow my voice.
Come this way. Come
Passengers scramble for safety before the fire spreads. 45 people survived the accident, but 24 people do not, including Captain Morwood and First Officer Mills. Emergency crews rush to the crash site deep in the woods. The injured are taken to hospital in Dryden.
I was very concerned because I kept looking at the wing all the time. I thought there was a lot of snow.
Well, I didn't notice anything wrong going down the runway. Like I said, it was just when we started hitting the trees, I knew there was something wrong.
Within 24 hours, a team of investigators from the Canadian Aviation Safety Board arrives at the scene.
You're going there, hopefully with the idea that you can find out what happened, why it happened, and how do you prevent it from happening in the future. We walked the entire path of the airplane to the threshold of the runway, and then we walked the flight path of the airplane right to the crash site. That was the first thing that I did. I wanted to document what I was seeing by photographing. When you walk in on an accident site like that, there are two things that overwhelm you. The smell of aviation jet fuel and the smell of death.
The trees just past the end of runway 29 give investigator David Rohr and his team vital clues about the F-28's failed flight.
What happened was the airplane went off the end of the runway in what we would call ground effect and just stayed at that height, simply clipping the tops of the trees.
Look at how these treetops have been clipped off.
It didn't ever fly. You've got 24 people that died. You've got 2 pilots that died and a flight attendant that died. And they died, for the most part, trying to do their job. So you really want to do them justice, but you also have to be fair. And if there were mistakes made, mistakes have to be fixed.
From the rear of the fuselage, investigators recover the F-28's 2 black boxes: the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. The devices are designed to withstand temperatures of 1100 degrees Celsius for up to 30 minutes. Investigators are frustrated to learn that the mylar tape from the recorders has suffered extreme heat damage. It's estimated the black boxes were scorched by an 1100-degree inferno for at least 90 minutes, far beyond their limit. The data is unrecoverable.
That was a big blow to us because now you have to try and gather information and try and establish that it's factual by independent routes.
We were just about to leave Thunder Bay and they gave us 10 new passengers.
Investigators must now rely heavily on eyewitness reports to reconstruct the events leading up to the doomed takeoff. They learned that the F-28 began its day in Winnipeg and was scheduled to fly a return route to Thunder Bay and back with a stopover in Dryden. But in Thunder Bay, plans changed. The cancellation of another flight forced the crew to pick up 10 additional passengers.
And when they did their calculations, they realized that we were overloaded and something had to come off.
All right, let's offload some fuel then.
They ended up removing fuel in order to be within the proper weight.
Dispatch, Ontario 363.
So the flight was delayed an hour.
The extra weight of the new passengers left the crew no choice. They had to unload fuel to lighten their load. That meant when they arrived in Dryden, they needed to pump in more than the usual amount of fuel for the final leg back to Winnipeg. Roa wonders if the change in plans somehow led to a miscalculation of the weight and balance. Was the F-28 too heavy for takeoff? He then uncovers a puzzling detail. The plane's weight and balance form for the takeoff from Dryden was never collected as required. It burned in the fire. Roa is forced to use Air Ontario's standard averages to calculate passenger and baggage weights. The data, combined with the airport's fuel records, allows him to estimate the plane's gross takeoff weight.
We knew how many people we had on board. We knew how many bags we had on the airplane. And we knew what our fuel load was.
He estimates the F-28 weighed between 62,000 and 64,000 pounds.
And the airplane's max takeoff weight was 65,000 pounds. And so we came to the conclusion that the airplane was not overweight.
The cause of the crash remains a mystery. 18 days into the investigation, the Canadian government appoints Justice Virgil Moshansky to lead a more wide-ranging inquiry into all aspects of the aviation system that might have contributed to the Air Ontario tragedy.
The government was looking for an experienced trial judge, and preferably one who had an aviation background.
Moshansky is an experienced pilot with 13 years on the bench. He will work closely with crash investigator David Roa and aviation consultant Frank Black. The new team's first step, assessing the plane's technical systems.
The electrical system, the hydraulic system, the fuel system, all of these systems are looked at both in terms of what is their history leading up to the accident and what remnants are remaining at the crash site that can be examined.
Clues to a possible system failure arise when Sonia Hartwig recalls a troubling event aboard the same plane just days before the fatal crash.
I think it was Monday or Tuesday. When we took off, there was this smoke that filled the aircraft, and there was this horrible smell. I thought, oh my God, we have a fire in the lab.
But there was no fire in the lavatory or anywhere else in the cabin.
They told us that apparently it had something to do with oil sitting in the APU system. So every takeoff that day, this would happen.
The auxiliary power unit is a generator that provides the power needed to start the engines. Did burning oil in the APU somehow cause a fire and ultimately doom Flight 1363? Roa searches the week's journey log for any mention of the auxiliary power unit. He makes a surprising discovery. The APU wasn't working on the day of the crash. It couldn't possibly have caused the fire. But the inoperative power unit may still have played a role in the tragedy. Investigators learned that it forced the crew to make a risky decision in Dryden.
We're onto the connectors. Let's hope it holds.
Normally, the captain would rely on the APU to restart his engines after shutting them both down for refueling.
But if he couldn't use his APU, he couldn't shut his engines down.
That meant Flight 1363 had to be refueled with one engine still running.
Captain Morwood is in a situation where he's got a hot refuel with passengers on board the aircraft. He's got to keep an engine running to refuel the airplane.
Hot refueling isn't against regulations, but the risk of a fuel spill makes it potentially dangerous. In Toronto in 1973, a maintenance person was killed when an Air Canada DC-8 jet was consumed by fire during refueling.
Hot refueling is not a normal practice.
Could the hot refueling have caused some kind of damage to the engines? The Dryden airport manager, a former military pilot, suspects there was trouble with the plane's engines. He tells Roa he saw the takeoff from his office and heard a sharp, explosive noise just as it disappeared from view. To him, it signified a flameout or engine failure.
I thought This is going to be a high-profile and potentially controversial investigation, and the only way to ensure that the truth stands up is to have hard evidence from the aircraft accident. And so we took the airplane completely and we put it in our lab in Ottawa.
Anything?
With signs pointing to engine failure as the cause of the crash,
strip it down.
ROA orders extensive engine testing.
Those engines were examined in detail for damage.
ROA finds the F-28's 2 Rolls-Royce engines suffered only minor structural damage. There's no evidence of an engine fire, nothing at all to suggest the engines had failed. With little physical evidence to explain the failed takeoff, investigators are back to square one. To solve the mystery, they comb through survivor and eyewitness statements. A common thread emerges.
They said in their witness statements there was snow and ice on the wings when the airplane attempted to take off.
ROA studies weather charts for clues.
We had very good meteorological information.
The charts show that during the half hour the F-28 was on the ground at Dryden Airport, visibility shrank from 4 kilometers to less than 1 kilometer because of the snowstorm.
And although we may find other reasons, for sure, snow and ice on the wings was a factor in this accident.
Sonia Hartwig tells investigators about an unusual sight during takeoff.
As we took off, I noticed that the wings just became a solid sheen of gray, shiny ice.
Investigators consult the F-28's manuals to study its anti-icing systems. They find that only the wing's leading edges are protected.
The aircraft had heated leading edges on the wings.
I wonder if the anti-icing system was working.
And the heat was provided by bleed air from the compressors on the engine. They found the valves that allow the compressed air access to the leading edges. And they tested the valve to see if it functioned, and it did.
The anti-icing system was working. But since it only heats the leading edge, it likely didn't clear ice that formed on the surface of Flight 1363's wings. Investigators suspect that snow and ice buildup, what experts call wing contamination, may have played a major role in the crash. To verify that suspicion, Roa and his team meet with engineers from Fokker.
Thanks for coming. Curious to see what you have.
Jack Van Hengst, who was the chief engineer, had extensive aerodynamic studies and data on the effects of contamination on an F-28 airplane.
Fokker engineers have run simulations of the crash.
They were able to get some very good data in terms of the performance of the airplane, simulating the type of loads, temperatures, etc., that the Dryden aircraft would have been exposed to.
Investigators make a crucial discovery about the design of the F-28. Because of the angle of the wings, a very small amount of ice makes the plane susceptible to stalling.
They concluded that even the most minute bit of contamination on the wing would disrupt the airflow and cause a loss of lift.
Well, that answers a lot of questions.
The simulations support what witnesses saw.
It just barely got airborne, dropping wings, losing lift, and then hitting trees, decelerating to the point where it broke up.
Investigators are now certain that contaminated wings caused the crash. But what's still unclear is why the plane was not de-iced before takeoff. Almost all airports in cold climates, including Dryden, are equipped with the technology to remove ice from a plane. But Captain Morwood never requested de-icing.
It's getting worse. What's the latest?
Investigators need to figure out why. They want to understand what made him risk his own life.
Let's hope it holds.
And the lives of the 68 other people on board Flight 1363. Investigators dig through Captain George Morwood's flight records and work history. They interview crew members, searching for clues to his behavior.
Captain Morwood was a very professional, very old-school pilot. He had his view on how things should be done properly and what his definition of proper and professional would be.
He also was very concerned about his passengers. He enjoyed making sure that they got on their flights on time and got to their destinations on time.
You know, Air Ontario was a growing company. It was their first foray into jet operations. I'm sure that there were many things that Captain Morwood would have thought in his own mind, this is not how he would do it. And I'm sure at times he probably let the superiors know that.
Morwood's history shows he's delayed and cancelled flights in the past because of icing concerns. Roa is stumped. Why didn't he request de-icing in Dryden? Another pilot who was at Dryden Airport that day provides part of the answer. He heard Morwood on the phone to Air Ontario.
That is what I have been trying to tell you.
He was very frustrated, and he was really concerned about his passengers.
Morwood complained to the off-duty pilot about the company.
These guys. You want to guess my weight before I left Thunder Bay? 66 and change. I had to offload fuel. Now that... Right. So now what am I supposed to do? No. You figure it out.
When he left the terminal, he was observed by witnesses to appear to be very upset and very angry.
Investigators wonder what set Morwood off. They try to piece together the pilot's day on March the 10th.
This was the 5th day of a very long week for Captain Morwood. And he was the next day leaving with his family on a ski vacation.
Before his first flight of the day, he'd learned the plane's APU still wasn't working. And then, once in Thunder Bay, more bad news. After refueling, the dispatcher forces Morwood to take on 10 extra passengers. Now he must offload fuel and lose more time.
There goes the schedule. Let's, offload some fuel then.
This meant Morwood would leave Thunder Bay behind schedule.
Dispatch, Ontario 363.
And Captain Morwood is the type of captain who didn't want to be late.
Now en route to Dryden, and an hour behind schedule, the weather forecast the crew was given of light rain and fog is no longer accurate.
And Captain Morwood didn't get the forecast of freezing rain coming into Dryden, which he should have had.
As Flight 1363 lands in Dryden, the weather was getting worse by the minute. The plane sat there for half an hour while snow built up on the wings.
I gotta talk to somebody about this.
Investigators may never know how concerned Morwood was about the weather. But there is evidence that it was on his mind. When Roa questions the fueling agent, he learns that Morwood did ask about de-icing moments before takeoff.
Is there de-icing available?
The fueling agent says he pointed out the de-icing ground crew to Morwood. The agent then offers a compelling reason that could explain why the captain didn't de-ice. Air Ontario had a policy prohibiting him from de-icing with an engine running.
The fluid can be ingested in the engines and then find its way from there to the air conditioning on the airplane and make it extremely noxious in the cabin portion of the airplane.
But if Morwood had shut down both engines, he wouldn't have been able to restart his plane.
Now, the only other way to start the airplane on the ground is with a ground-based air cart that can provide the compressed air. And Dryden did not have the capability to start the airplane.
The equipment would have had to be flown in from Winnipeg. It would have been a costly decision.
If he shut it down, he would ground the aircraft there effectively, requiring the billeting of passengers and hotels and at an expense to the airline for which he would be answerable.
Right. So now what?
So he was under a great deal of pressure.
No. You figure it out.
And I believe that the conversation on the phone would have been about that scenario and his displeasure with it. But he didn't have any other chance.
It's getting worse. What's the latest?
Quite heavy snow. Looks like it's going to be a bad one. It's still within our takeoff limits.
Well, that's good. We got a lot of people who want to make the connectors. Let's hope it holds.
Though the amount of snow on the wings was still within limits, it's what lay under the snow that doomed the flight. The fuel in a plane's wing can get as cold as -40 degrees Celsius. The frigid fuel cools the metal surface of the wing. When snow hits this supercooled surface, it freezes instantly into a barely visible layer of ice. It's a process called cold soaking.
And this, of course, is what's disrupting the airflow on the wing and destroying the lifting capabilities.
Tell them we're going immediately.
Kenora, Ontario, we're taxiing out at this time 360.
The only reason that I can possibly think of that led to his decision to execute the takeoff was the fact that he didn't consider the cold soaking phenomena and the fact that those wings could still have ice on them.
Advise Kenora, we're ready to proceed.
And Kenora, Dryden, Ontario.
Perhaps not wanting to face the consequences of shutting down his engines, Morwood opted to take off for Winnipeg without de-icing his plane.
He must have concluded that the ice would blow off on takeoff. That is where he made a mistake, a tragic mistake.
But Mashansky concludes that despite his mistake, Captain Morwood is not solely responsible for the crash.
It wasn't simply pilot error. There were myriad of factors which were the cause of the accident.
One of the most important factors, Air Ontario's decision to let the plane fly with a broken APU.
They were deferring a lot of the maintenance that should have been done because of a shortage of parts. And then they had to scrounge around all across Canada with various F-28 operators to borrow parts from them. And this was a very bad move on the part of Air Ontario management.
The investigation determines that by cutting corners and focusing too much on the bottom line, the airline was putting all their passengers and employees at risk.
Because the F-28s were new to Air Ontario, there was this urgency to get one crew off and get the next crew on flying. This urgency to have them in the air producing money.
I came to the conclusion after a lot of thought about this accident that there were a lot of other hands on those throttles, pushing those throttles forward. There were a lot of people that were involved in the sequence of events that led to this tragic outcome.
This was a preventable accident, but everything conspired against the pilots.
I gotta talk to somebody about this.
Because Air Ontario management did not have a safety culture. And you have to have a safety culture from the top management down.
Knowing there are dozens of Fokker F-28s flying around the world, Justice Mashansky takes an unusual step. He releases a report well before his inquiry concludes.
Good afternoon.
It warns of the plane's vulnerability to ice buildup and stresses the need for frequent de-icing in winter conditions.
Even a small amount of icing would be disastrous on an F-28.
But 15 months later, it becomes clear that Mashansky's warnings have not been heard. US Air Flight 405 is preparing to fly from New York to Cleveland on March the 22nd, 1992. The plane is a Fokker F-28, and it's snowing. It's 1 degree below freezing. At 9 p.m., the jet is being de-iced for a second time since its arrival from Florida. In the past hour, an inch of snow has fallen and shows no signs of stopping.
US Air 405, clear to taxi runway 13.
The crew prepares for takeoff. Flight 405 is an hour and 45 minutes behind schedule when Captain Wallace Majeur starts taxiing to runway 13. Then, unexpectedly,
US Air 405, turn left into hold short of Echo.
Left on the inner to hold short of Echo.
At 9:07 p.m., Flight 405 is forced to wait on the taxiway near runway 13. Another 23 minutes pass. First Officer John Rashuba turns on a light that illuminates his wings. He checks the right wing for ice. He sees none.
Looks pretty good to me as far as I can see.
US Air 405, runway 13, clear for takeoff.
Even though it's now been 35 minutes since their last de-icing, the crew does not request another.
Takeoff thrusts set. Temp's okay.
Everything proceeds as it should. Until...
V1. Rotate.
Just after the F-28 begins its rotation.
The aircraft had enough flying speed to lift off. Barely lift off. The wings just could not support the airplane. They knew they were in trouble.
13 seconds after lifting off, Flight 405 crashes on the shore of Flushing Bay.
I don't think any pilot really thinks he's going to crash. They were trying to save the airplane right to the end.
27 of the 51 people on board are killed. Another Fokker F-28 has crashed, with tragic consequences.
My reaction when I heard about it was, my God, it's Dryden all over again.
Within days, investigator in charge Robert Benson suspects that ice on the wings was the major cause.
It would be very, very difficult for either of the pilots to really detect ice on the wings, looking backwards over their shoulders through the side windows of the airplane.
Looks pretty good to me as far as I can see.
So the captain was faced with quite a problem. If he wanted to be de-iced a third time, he would have had to get out on the lines, taxi all the way back into the parking area, and meet up with a de-icing truck again.
Takeoff thrusts.
That would have put him very, very late, and it may have even caused the cancellation of the flight.
After all of this work, after all of the efforts, to see it happen again was extremely frustrating.
There were no regulations in place requiring the crew to seek another de-icing after their extended delay. But Justice Mashansky had called attention to the dangers of long wait times when he issued his interim report.
If they had followed the recommendations in my second interim report, this accident certainly could have been averted.
He also had drawn attention to the limitations of the de-icing fluid being used at the time. Called Type 1 fluid, it's a mixture of antifreeze and water.
Those chemicals are designed that as you accelerate down the runway, that they'll actually shed off your wing, so that when you actually want the wing to lift and produce lift, that it's not contaminated.
Type 1 fluid is applied hot to de-ice the plane's surfaces. But it doesn't last long.
Type 1 fluid had a holdover time in their best conditions of about 15 minutes. Under poor conditions, such as freezing rain, it could be as low as 6 minutes.
During the Air Ontario investigation, Mashansky's team reached a stark conclusion about the effectiveness of Type 1 fluid. Even if Captain Morwood could have de-iced his plane in Dryden,
We're fired up, taxiing for departure, requesting airways to Winnipeg.
it may have made no difference.
Hang on a sec, guys. Is there a chance that plane can hold? We're having some bad weather up here.
Unbelievable.
Flight 1363 had to wait for the troubled Cessna 150 to land.
By the time he waited for this 150 aircraft and pilot to land, and then they backtracked and got into position, now they're in a serious snowstorm, and they are getting contaminated.
Even if Morwood had de-iced during his 30 minutes on the ground,
rotate.
The delay may have been enough for the fluid to stop working. The plane's wings may once again have become coated in ice.
It came out in the examination of Air Ontario pilots that there was a dire need for training in terms of how the de-icing, anti-icing systems worked and how long your aircraft was protected.
As soon as our accident occurred up in New York, we of course understood that it was a similar aircraft, in fact a nearly identical aircraft to the Dryden accident airplane. The circumstances were similar in both accidents, and the Dryden report was a tour de force, which helped us focus our investigation quite a bit.
Justice Mashansky had released his interim report more than a year before the crash of Flight 405. His recommendations could have prevented it. Mashansky would soon discover that a breakdown in communication had cost the lives of 27 people in New York. During his inquiry, Justice Mashansky learned that there was another type of de-icing fluid available to the airline industry. It's called Type 2 fluid. It's thicker than Type 1, which prevents it from immediately flowing off an aircraft.
A Type 2 fluid is a much more gooey substance. I've heard it referred to as almost mucus-like.
With holdover times of up to 45 minutes, it keeps ice from accumulating, then blows off the plane's surfaces at takeoff. 15 months before the US air crash, Mashansky recommended greater use of the thicker Type 2 fluid. Mashansky's investigators also studied de-icing practices at Toronto's Pearson Airport.
We got hold of a film crew, and we waited and watched the weather very carefully until we found a forecast of freezing rain. And we tracked one aircraft which was heading for the Caribbean.
The investigators discovered an alarming gap in the time between de-icing and takeoff.
And from the time the aircraft was de-icing on the gate until the time the aircraft took off was somewhere in the order of 41 minutes. So there was no doubt that aircraft were departing Pearson Airport with a partially or largely contaminated wing surface. We then went to Chicago O'Hare. This was the first airport to actually put in place runway end de-icing pads. And it was very useful in terms of explaining to us how these had evolved, what type of de-icing equipment they were using on them, how they worked.
At the time of the US air crash, LaGuardia did not offer de-icing at the runway, only at the gate. Again, 15 months before the crash, Justice Mashansky recommended the placement of de-icing facilities at runways instead of terminal gates. Mashansky also recommended that pilots not only inspect their wings from the cockpit,
Looks pretty good to me as far as I can see.
but also from the cabin.
US Air 405, runway 13, cleared for takeoff.
Mashansky claims that his report could have prevented the crash at LaGuardia. But the Federal Aviation Administration claims it never received his report in 1990, and therefore couldn't pass the information along to airlines and pilots. But Justice Mashansky doesn't accept that.
My second interim report went out in December of 1990. It was about a year and a half before the LaGuardia crash occurred. So I think probably sat on somebody's desk.
The The crash of Flight 1363 resulted in dozens of recommendations that could save lives. The crash of Flight 405 ensured those recommendations were widely implemented.
Well, there was a lot that came out of Dryden. I mean, the commission came out with 192 recommendations. It changed the whole nature of how we approach contamination.
We now have runway end de-icing pads, so they can get a final de-icing before they take off. This was something directly the result of the Dryden Commission inquiry.
Today, most airlines use a new type of de-icing fluid. Type 4 de-icing fluid lasts longer. It will stick to a wing for up to 2 hours. As well, air traffic controllers must now be able to tell flight crews how long they will be delayed at the runway after being de-iced.
Dryden is really the first accident that explored not only what happens in the pointed end of an airplane, but what happens within a corporate culture. It put CEOs on notice that they can't hide in the woodwork when an accident occurs.
Dutch manufacturer Fokker went bankrupt in 1996. Despite this, in 2009, there were still 55 Fokker F-28 jets in operation worldwide, mostly in warmer climates.
Nobody should ever lose their life due to a contamination accident again in commercial aviation, anywhere in a snow and ice environment. We've learned all the lessons